Hello.
Our story begins inside the Republic military complex on Coruscant. Ahsoka was guided into a cell where Letta Thurmond was being kept. She agreed to tell Ahsoka information in exchange for protection. Letta was terrified of the person she joined forces with to make an example of the Jedi Order. Their bombing was to hold a mirror up to the Order and show them what their actions caused the people of the galaxy, as well as give them a taste of the war they brought to so many. Letta was fearful because after her agreement with Barriss had gone well, the young Jedi decided to turn on her. She threatened her life. Letta was bargaining for protection and planned on using Barriss as a scapegoat, claiming Jedi mind trick or something else. She was still working on the basics of her plan, but she was very nervous upon Ahsoka's arrival. She was insistent to tell her the truth, so that this case could go on without any extra hiccups. Letta wanted the clones away from them, so Ahsoka looked back and nodded, to which Fox left the room and moved back to the command center. While he was in there, he noticed Ahsoka apparently lifting Letta up into the air, but something was off about the entire situation. He didn't know the Jedi or the Force, but he could tell if something was intentional or not. He was commander of the Coruscant Guard. While his brothers were out getting traumatized by super clankers and knocked off by asthmatic generals, he was here arresting the criminals of Coruscant. He knew when something was being done intentionally or not. Fox wasn't above not noticing something out of the ordinary. This also did not mean he believed Ahsoka was innocent. He issued out a couple swift orders as he and two men ran to the cell that Letta was in. When they got there, it was too late. She had died. Commander Fox continued forward, as Ahsoka claimed that she wasn't responsible. Fox told her that if it was all the same to her, he couldn't afford to believe that. She was shocked and afraid. There was someone else inside this building that killed Letta, and that individual could still be on the loose, well, they obviously were. But Fox didn't stay in the cell with Ahsoka. He ran back out and told his troopers where to put Ahsoka for the time being. He then ran into the command room and quickly plugged in his access code into the computer console. As his troops turned to him and asked what he was doing, Fox looked over and told them to go, lock down the facility. These men weren't trying to question answers, but they thought they captured the culprit. Fox thought so too. Kind of. He wanted to be sure. Again, in his mind, something didn't feel right. He locked down the command room, stationed the facility in the high alert, while also flushing the ventilation system and raising the ray shield. This facility was designed to maintain the war separatist leaders in the war, so they made sure that none of them would escape, even General Grievous. So this military complex was updated with numerous defense mechanisms, one of which being the external ray shield. Upon its activation, no one would be entering or leaving the facility. Fox didn't want to hide in the command room, but he set up camp inside until his reinforcements came by. Due to the flushing in the ventilation system, the entire facility's temperature would drop drastically, so he had to send up troops to ensure the prisoners were taken care of, especially Plago the Lesser. Cold temperatures could kill him, being that he was Geonosian. The clones were all awoken from their sleep, or taken out of lunch or breaks and put to work. Facility lockdowns were especially important to react to, and the clones of the Coruscant Guard did as they needed, getting to their positions and maintaining them, again following procedures for ventilation flushes. Vox waited for his elite guard, the ones carrying pikes, to enter the room. He told them to lock it down and expressed that they should not open it up unless he specifically showed his face and gave them the order. Until then, this facility was locked down. No one was to leave or enter. The clones nodded their heads and locked their commander out once he exited. Fox looked around and then called to his brothers who were moving down the hallway. They informed him that the facility was fully locked down. They then asked what they were looking for, and he told them that he was unsure. The clones were confused by this. Commander Fox wasn't usually one to beat around the bush, or not have an answer, but he didn't have one this time. He didn't believe Ahsoka was responsible, but he needed Ahsoka and whoever was in the room to believe that's what he thought. With the facility locked down, they could begin their work. The clones in the command room were able to keep an eye on all the security footage, though Fox wanted to make sure every location was defended and secured. He took his group of men through the hallway next to admin and into storage. If there was another culprit, not Ahsoka, inside the building, they likely would be there. Fox and his men spread out, climbing crates, looking in the trash compactors, and even pulling off a few panels off the walls and checking the electrical wiring to see if anyone snuck into them from the vents. At the same time, Ahsoka's cell opened and she was given a blanket, as she asked the trooper what was going on. The clone apologized to the commander, informing her that he could not tell her at this time. She nodded her head and thanked him for the blanket. The building may have become cold, but the vents were turned into deadly locations. If there was someone in them, they had a good 3 minutes to get in and out before they were killed. As Commander Fox and his men were finishing up their scan of storage, they got a communication from one of their troopers, reporting that they found a couple dead clones in electrical. Fox and the men ran as fast as they could, moving down the hall and slipping into the electrical room of the facility. Luckily, the electrical room's controls were shut down when the facility was locked down, so whoever was responsible for this couldn't mess with their controls. Fox ran in and looked to the dead clones, turning to the men that followed him in and giving them a couple hand signals. This was simply the order to spread out and investigate the room, see if there were any other entry points. The clones that were already in the room informed Fox that there were no markings, similarly to how Letta was killed. This still didn't clear Ahsoka, but there was no way that she could have done this if she was in a cell. Fox radioed back to the men in the control room and asked what Ahsoka was doing in her cell for the last 20 minutes or so, telling them to report back once they scanned all the footage. With every clone finally up and moving around, with the vents still unsafe for anyone to be in, the culprit was destined to be found. Fox had no doubt in his mind that they would find them, still feeling that it was unlikely that Ahsoka was responsible. As the electrical room was finished being investigated, he was informed from the men in the control room that Ahsoka hadn't done anything. She spoke to a trooper and took a blanket and then laid down. She was currently looking at the ceiling and not moving. There was also no audio coming from her cell, so she was just being silent, perhaps even meditating, but she was breathing. Fox thanked the troopers as he moved out of electrical, with no signs as to where the murderer went. Fox's squad continued moving around until one of them called up to their commander, informing him that their comms just went dead. The unit of men turned back, looking down the hallway. They were moving back to the detention area to see if there was anyone in there, but now, it seems like their enemy was more elusive than they initially believed them to be. Fox told 4 of the men to stay here, make sure no one left down this hallway. The rest of them were going to turn communications back on. The clones shuffled down the hallway, their blasters set to kill, and when they entered the room, they saw it rampaged. There'd be no turning on the communications. Fox and his men spread out as they examined the room. The clones stationed to protect it were slain by lightsaber. Without their comms, Fox couldn't check back with the command room to make sure it wasn't Ahsoka, because if these attacks were made with lightsaber, then they needed to be careful of their opponent. The Coruscant Guard was well aware of Pong Krell from Umbara. It's why Fox was even more distrusting of the Jedi, but they were also well aware of how difficult it would be to kill a Jedi if this culprit was indeed one. Hopefully it wasn't Ahsoka, but they had to be sure. Fox knew he couldn't continue dividing up the men. It would make their hunt even more difficult, especially with men dropping as quickly as they were. This facility was huge too. There was no saying where the murderer went. Fox looked at the control panel in the communications room, as he noted that whoever was behind this locked the comms in the building before destroying the console itself. Essentially, they jammed everything and made it impossible to reverse the frequency, while also turning off the security footage. Fox took his men out. He knew the detention area was the most heavily defended. He looked down both sides of the hallway. If the culprit was trying to get out, what would they do next? One would think they would go straight for the control room. They already cleared their exit because the cameras were shut down, meaning that they couldn't be seen, and likely all the most recent footage was probably lost due to the ventilation flush. The cams were naturally hot, due to being powered up, but they weren't on and they were also being blasted with coolant from the ceiling, which would probably fry their circuitry. The commander took his men and led them down the hallway. He believed that the individual wouldn't go to the control room. Instead, they would go to the reactor so they could divert all the tension in the facility to the reactor and then run back to the control room for their escape. But he had another idea. When he arrived at the control room, he took Ahsoka's lightsabers personally and ran with them all the way back to the detention block, while also setting up a majority of his squad with the control room unit. The facility was expertly designed, again, intended to keep the most deadly individuals in the galaxy inside of it. So while they might take down comms and the reactor, they still needed to get to the control room. The designers made sure that if the situation got this bad, then they could lock themselves in the control room with a spare generator. The generator itself was designed to only activate if the reactor malfunctioned, and it was specifically created to maintain power across the entire facility. In other words, individuals trying to escape needed to take out both the reactor and the control room, but if they did that, there couldn't be much of an escape. The vents were still below freezing, and the Republic military would be informed that there was a problem, because once the ray shields activated, it sent a distress signal to the docking yards and the Jedi Temple. Regardless, Fox ran into Ahsoka's cell and freed her from her restraints, now that it was entirely clear that she was not behind this. Fox then quietly told her that he understood she might feel some animosity towards him, but he believed her the entire time. He just knew that whoever else was inside of the facility was listening and would bite the bait. Ahsoka wasn't killing anyone with her lightsabers because her lightsabers were still under their control until he gave them to her. Ahsoka looked to Fox and asked what happened, to which he explained everything, as well as explained why she was being freed. She asked if the reactor had been hit yet, and he shook his head. Ahsoka expressed that she would like to split up with a group of his best men. He agreed. Fox was worried for the potential of those troopers getting killed, but he had his faith in Ahsoka. The biggest reason for this is, while he wasn't paid to keep this kind of information, he was well aware that Ahsoka wasn't on Coruscant when the temple was bombed. She was just aiding the investigation. The setup felt too forced. There was no way that she would bomb the temple from afar, agree to come back, agree to be on the investigative team, and then kill the potential bomber in the cell with security footage watching her. Maybe it was reverse psychology and he would be at fault for that, but it seemed like a lot of steps just to get herself caught. Outside the facility, Obi-Wan and Anakin arrived. Skywalker wanted to get in, but the troopers outside the facility informed him that that would be impossible. They needed to wait until the situation came to its conclusion. Fox returned to his unit in the control room, as Ahsoka was led by 20 shock troopers to the reactor room. When they got there, the clones were still patrolling and everything was under control. Ahsoka closed her eyes, sensing with the Force, trying to find whoever it was that was behind this attack. She was well aware that this individual had a lightsaber, and that they were able to sneak around the facility. She looked over and scanned the outskirts of the reactor, looking for any signs of an anomaly. As she did so, she could see a dark robe covering something. It looked like a body shrouded in darkness, blending in with the wall. Ahsoka called out that she saw something, and as the words left her mouth, the ground began to rattle. The clones turned their attention to both the rattling and the shadow on the wall. The reactor was detonating. Ahsoka pulled the clones and told them to go. Those who were nearest to the reactor ran towards her as she guided them into the central building. The men who entered the reactor room with her began to open fire at the shadow on the wall. Ahsoka looked back and thought she recognized the face, but she still couldn't tell. A few clones running from the reactor started firing too, but Ahsoka turned her attention back to the others escaping from the fires and helped them get out. Some of them leapt towards her and she used the Force to pull them in. She was very quick to save those in immediate danger, while helping evacuate the rest of the troopers. Once everyone but the firing men were clear, she pushed them out, so that they could escape the reactor explosion. She was the last one out of the room. The shadow on the wall, from what Ahsoka could tell, was limber and moved quickly. While Ahsoka's initial suspicion, based on movements alone, was Asajj Ventress, she didn't believe it was her. Ventress wasn't dead, but she also wasn't working with the Separatists. As Ahsoka understood, this was likely another Separatist assailant, but why did the character look so familiar? Ahsoka rubbed her head as the others looked at her, asking if she was alright. She explained everything to them, and then suggested that they get to the other side of the reactor and try and cut off this individual. The clones nodded, and followed after Ahsoka. As they ran around the corner, they were blitzed by the assassin. They threw a bundle of clones into the wall before igniting a blue lightsaber and swinging. Ahsoka jumped in between the clones and the assassin. Their blades collided, as Ahsoka demanded to know who it was. She recognized all the moves, and then when she locked eyes with Barriss, her heart stopped. What was her best friend doing? Before Ahsoka could fully grasp what she was seeing, she was kicked in the face and thrown backwards. The clones opened fire, one of the shots clipping Barriss in the side, but it was nothing more than a flesh wound. She deflected blaster bolts and attacked with precision. Her strikes were quick, as she tried to make Ahsoka look guilty for the crime, but the clones weren't going to go down that easily. To Barriss, it wasn't personal, she was just trying to send a message, but this was a perfect way to pass the blame off onto someone else. Ahsoka got to her feet and struck at Barriss, who moved slightly out of the way. Their duel commenced, with clones moving around the two Jedi, getting their sights locked on Barriss. Everything became especially clear that Ahsoka was being framed. As they were doing this, Ahsoka was able to cut the hood off of Barriss' neck, revealing her whole face, proving what was already unbelievably true. The two Jedi fought across the halls, Ahsoka's training shining through each of these steps. Ahsoka spun around Barriss before getting kicked in the back and slipping. Ahsoka turned around and moved her blades up to defend herself, the entire move being intentional. As she looked up, Barriss wore a shocked expression. But there was something else. The smoke billowing out of Commander Fox's pistol. He looked down to Ahsoka and she looked up to Barriss, who fell into her lap. Ahsoka held her former friend, not knowing how to emotionally react to the situation. Barriss apologized to her friend, telling her that she just wanted to send a message. She didn't think it would go this deep. She only wanted to show the Jedi what they did wrong to the galaxy, how they continued to fight in a war that had no winners. Ahsoka frowned, still too confused to really say anything of substance back to her friend, as she died in her lap. The clones looked down, as Ahsoka slowly moved to get up. Fox got around and helped her off the ground. He again apologized for blaming her, but he was glad he did, implying that he would do it 100 times if it meant they would catch the real traitor. Ahsoka nodded her head and thanked Fox for believing in her. Now she was confused, and didn't know how to even comprehend what had just happened. When the ray shields dropped, Anakin and Obi-Wan were the first inside, as Ahsoka shakily abandoned the location with her master. Kenobi would finish off everything for her. Ahsoka was very distant. Anakin was of course glad she was alright, but he wasn't able to get much information out of her. She was usually really resilient, and he understood how troubling it may have been for her, being that she and Barriss were tight friends. Anakin was proud of her for persevering, but of course, there was the entire dying breath that Barriss shared with Ahsoka, that she did not reiterate to her master. The following few days would be filled with tiresome debates and arguments. Ahsoka was forced to be present for all of it. Thankfully, Commander Fox promised her to make sure he kept her name out of it as much as he could. That didn't really mean much because she was very integral to the entire judiciary investigation of it. Palpatine was involved and Ahsoka had to spend copious hours with Yoda, Palpatine, Windu, Plo Koon, Obi-Wan, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Commander Fox, and a number of other political leaders and witnesses. It was a stressful event, and she wasn't even given the proper time to really make sense of what was said to her and how she felt about it. There was a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, and tiresome interrogations, and before she knew it, she was a Jedi Knight. After the days of constant back and forth, from the Republic military complex to the temple, to the Senate building, to the temple, to the executive building, to the Republic military complex, to the temple, Ahsoka crashed. The war was bad. It was awful actually, but this wore her down unlike anything else ever did. Perhaps the Council saw its effects on her and wanted to make her a master or a knight or whatever it was that she was now. Ahsoka really mentally checked out after Barriss's death. She thought it'd be a separatist assassin or someone sent by Dooku, but nope. Barriss acted alone, well aside from Letta and her husband who was killed in the bombing. But the operation itself was started by Barriss and completed by her. Anakin was extremely excited for Ahsoka. He understood that this would hurt, but she was a Jedi Knight, one at the age of 17. While she was willing to humor his excitement, it didn't change her own demeanor, not her feelings on the matter neither. She and Anakin had their disagreements about the war itself, and their fundamental issues regarding it, but to Ahsoka, she could not wrap her mind around killing innocents to prove a message. Was this only because of the Jedi? Was Barriss naive, or was she right? These thoughts ate away at Ahsoka, and slowly, Anakin started to take notice of it. His initial excitement had to be placed on the back burner, because he could feel that his student was hurting. The entire situation was a mess, and he believed that the best thing to do was get her away from Coruscant. There was very little that they could do, but Anakin thought of all of Ahsoka's favorite things and tried to figure out which one would bring her the most happiness. He took her to Padme so the two of them could go out together and spend some quality time not working. It gave Padme a break, but also allowed Ahsoka time to be in the public without feeling like the galaxy was eating itself alive. A lot of her time spent with Padme was people watching, something that helped reignite a flame in her heart, one that reminded her that there were good people in the galaxy. During this, Anakin had all the clones come up with little testimonials for Ahsoka, and even decided to delegate a sect of his unit to her. So when Ahsoka came back, the clones painted their armor so it looked like her markings on the headpiece. Anakin was desperate to make sure she could enjoy this moment. For Anakin, becoming a knight was an exciting time, and for his student, he wanted it to feel the same. There was also an added benefit for Ahsoka when she spent time with Padme. She was able to talk about her emotions instead of keeping them bottled up as most Jedi do. So when she returned, she was both feeling better and greeted by a loving response from her men. The clones adored her as a commander, and they, thanks to motivation from Anakin, were able to show their gratitude for her leadership, compassion, and her strength. Ahsoka was able to slowly pull herself out of this lull, and it was in part to a strong support system around her. While she wouldn't ever consider leaving the Order, she did consider becoming a hermit inside the temple. As a knight, she didn't have to join Anakin on the front lines, and she could do her own thing, like protect former Jedi outposts or temples, like the Jedi from the Temple of Edith did. But instead, she stuck with the 501st and her general. Ahsoka's dissociation lasted for a couple months, which impeded her judgment on Ringo Vinda, when the war had yet another twist, one that no one could have predicted. Clone Trooper Tup assassinated a Jedi Master in cold blood. He had no memory of it and was transported back to Kamino. Ahsoka almost went, but decided against it last second, seeing the entire situation as a medical procedure that she couldn't really help with. That perhaps was the greatest change in her. Ahsoka had a lot of self-doubt now. Her confidence was shot and she didn't really know how to repair it. So when they won the Battle of Ringo Vinda, they were transported back to Coruscant as General Tiplar maintained control over the troops after the Republic victory. Skywalker's unit returned just around the same time that Shaak Ti brought Fives back to the planet. There was unnerving news regarding Tup and Fives. There seemed to be a conspiracy, one that Shaak Ti believed to be accurate, so she was bringing Fives to the Chancellor to speak about the issue. What she didn't know is Fives was drugged by Nala Se inside of their transport. Palpatine told him some figment of the truth, which Fives freaked out about, especially with the drugs in the system. He attempted to kill Palpatine and then made a run for it. Ahsoka, Anakin, and Rex were dispatched to talk to Fives about the entire event, after Clone Trooper Kix learned of everything and revealed the truth to the Jedi General. Anakin was the most aggravated in the bunch, not fully understanding why Fives would do something so heinous. Ahsoka and Rex were the two believers that there was something else at play here. Fives was one of the most mentally strong soldiers in the division. He was an ARC trooper after all. It wasn't like him to have a mental break. When they arrived at the warehouse, Ahsoka stopped, telling them that she would wait outside in case he tried to make an escape. Rex and Anakin looked to each other and then agreed. It was a smart decision. If Fives ran, she'd be able to catch him faster than anyone else. Ahsoka stood with her hands on her hips as she turned back and looked into the pit they arrived in. Anakin and Rex moved in and were trapped within a ray shield. While Ahsoka was waiting, she was approached by a handful of clones. Commander Fox landed with his men, and Ahsoka asked why they were here. The commander greeted Ahsoka kindly, but was expressive that they needed to get inside the warehouse. Ahsoka stepped back and put her hand up. The clones had their weapons set for kill. She told Fox that General Skywalker had the situation under control, and he respected that, but he had orders to follow. Orders from the Supreme Chancellor. Ahsoka nodded her head, but told him to trust her, like he had before. This situation was under control. General Skywalker and Captain Rex could handle this. Fox was very testy. Not that he didn't trust Ahsoka, it was clear the two of them had a strong line of trust for each other, but he was trying to follow his directive. Ahsoka could sense his desire to get in, so in a way to alleviate it, she told Fox to spread his men out, encircle the warehouse, and wait for General Skywalker's command. Fox still wasn't buying it, and Ahsoka informed him by getting close to him and whispering that the Chancellor sent them here. It's why they were here first. It was on the down low, not something that was meant to be shared. She didn't know why Fox was sent down here to do whatever it was that Palpatine wanted them to do, but these were the words shared with her, Anakin, and Rex. Fox lowered his weapon. He looked to his men and nodded, giving them the directive to spread out and secure the premises. Ahsoka asked Fox about how he'd been, and he tried to maintain his clone commander status through conversation, but he loosened up just a little bit, telling her that things had gotten more hostile in the city. The lower levels were suffering terribly due to lack of interest from the Senate and the Chancellor. He had more clone deaths in the last few months than the entirety of the first 2 years of the war combined. People were sick, and the clones were on edge. She told him that she was sorry about that, as he moved the conversation onto how she had been since the entire debacle with former Jedi Padawan Barazafi. Ahsoka shrugged her shoulders, expressing that she felt very distant from everyone else. Being a knight felt good, but she felt like she was separated, and she didn't really know how to process the entire event with Barriss. Fox understood. He told her how painful it was to lose Coruscant guardsmen on missions away from Coruscant. While the situation was different, he believed that she would persevere. Inside the warehouse, with the extra time, Fives was able to ramble out his inner demons, telling General Skywalker and Captain Rex that Palpatine was in on the joke. There was a secret within their genetic makeup, something that could tell the universe that the Chancellor was evil. Anakin smacked the ray shield, telling Fives that the Chancellor was not capable of such evil, but Rex wasn't siding with Skywalker. It wasn't the fact that Rex and Fives were brothers, it was the fact that Fives was terrified, with proof that beyond a shadow of a doubt, Palpatine had his hands in the Grand Army of the Republic. Anakin told Fives that his actions would have consequences and he would be tried, and before he could finish, Fives interrupted. Tried for what? Telling the truth? Exposing that Palpatine wasn't who he said he was? Fives didn't know what these differences were between religious oppressors and liberators, but he was adamant that he could control the entire Grand Army with a word. Rex told Anakin that they needed to have him examined at the Jedi Temple. Skywalker whipped back in total disbelief that Rex would believe this traitor. But Rex owed it to Fives. There was a reason for Top's death. There was a reason Nala Se was on Coruscant, why Shaak Ti brought Fives here. There was a secret that they did not have, and he vowed to offer himself up as a test subject to prove these theories, being that these inhibitor chips, or whatever they were, no longer were in the hands of the right people. Anakin huffed, telling Rex to get Fives into their ship. He did not agree with this, but they were going to do it to prove that the Chancellor was innocent. Fives released the grip as Anakin walked back to the ship with a heavy scowl. When he exited the warehouse, he could see Fox and Ahsoka talking. She wore a smile on her face, brighter than he'd seen in a while. Fox was telling her a funny story of a criminal that evaded the clones, and how he'd draw obscure things on their bikes and speeders just to irritate them. The guy, after being caught, told them that he didn't have any political motivations. He just thought clones had funny reactions. Ahsoka's smile warmed Anakin's heart, as she caught sight of him from her peripherals. She told Anakin that she had just informed Fox about the Chancellor's mission. Anakin nodded his head slowly, trying to catch up, and Fox stepped to attention, informing Anakin that the troopers present were here to assist in any which way. Rex and Fives walked out, and Fox moved for his pistols, not pulling them, but just in case there was an issue. Rex overheard Ahsoka's comment about the Chancellor's mission. He knew what she was doing and told Fives to keep it cool. They would all go to the temple to make sure Palpatine was unaware. Rex told Fox that he just got off communication with the Chancellor. He wanted to have Fives taken to the Jedi Temple, being that he was meant to go there anyways. It seemed like the entire thing was a misunderstanding. Fox asked about his directive and Rex nodded, telling him that they were going to come too. Fox nodded his head, not really considering the fact that Rex shouldn't have known about the guard being present. But maybe Palpatine forgot something or someone. He was a busy person, Fox could understand that. He forgot orders before, and he was a third of Palpatine's age. Mistakes were bound to happen, right? They traveled back to the temple, with Rex and Fives in one transport, and all the other clones with either Ahsoka or Anakin. Rex specifically wanted this divide because, as quoted by Rex before leaving, that Fives was facing some side effects from Nala Se's experiments on Kamino, and they were making clustered spaces feel more claustrophobic than they needed to be. He used this space to contact the temple with Skywalker's frequency, informing them of the situation and allowing them to get ready. Upon their arrival, there was a welcoming party of council members, which only confirmed what Fox believed was true. Rex knew that Fox was a stickler for the rules, so everything had to feel like it was issued out and ordered by Palpatine himself. The reason Fox never contacted Palpatine was because Rex said he had received orders. Plus, why wouldn't he trust Ahsoka? She never lied to him before. Their bond was strong, same with Rex. Immediately, Rex went in and had his inhibitor chip removed, as it was revealed that Rex's little quick thinking proved to be correct. A medical test on Fives proved that he was under hallucinogens, ones that lasted for weeks. The medics would reduce the effects so that he could return to normal behavior. Fox watched over, initially with confusion and slowly outrage. While it was his duty to serve the Chancellor, he couldn't lie, and he had to be honest about his feelings. He and Ahsoka were speaking as Rex and another Coruscant guardsman went under the procedure. The fact that Nala Se and Palpatine were in close contact and willing to poison Fives unnerved him. Shaak Ti was present to inform the other Jedi and clones of the situation leading up to the Fives' escape. Fox's head was like a whirlwind. How could he plausibly explain this? He would defend Palpatine to the ends of the galaxy, but there was something else at play here, even to him. Whatever it was terrible. The Jedi were clearly trying to help, and without thinking, he volunteered himself as well. The medical droids in the temple were able to diagnose the issue, and the clones present all went forward with their inhibitor chip removal. Mace gave orders to another Jedi to go quietly out and remove every inhibitor chip in the Grand Army, telling them to place it under a mandated inoculation for a disease found on Ringo Vinda, just a simple way to cover it up as the Jedi moved to confront the Senate. It would take several hours for everything to get arranged, but it also allowed the Jedi more time to prepare everything. Palpatine didn't expect much from it. He knew Fox was following his orders, so the purpose of this emergency meeting had him happy, assuming the Jedi were going to vote more emergency powers into his control. When the discussion started, the Jedi revealed that they discovered the clones were being controlled by Palpatine. The inhibitor chips were controlled, and ARC Trooper 5s, who had been drugged by Palpatine loyalist Nala Se, had the truth revealed to him. 5 spoke to an outraged Senate, as Palpatine used every ounce of his political brilliance to calm his mind and prepare a rebuttal. 5s told them that Palpatine explained how he was behind the war and he had the power to control every clone in the Grand Army without their consent. While Palpatine loyalists would play this off as executive power, it was the furthest thing from. The clones and Jedi rallied together to tear Palpatine apart with concrete evidence that Palpatine had a trick up his sleeve, declaring the Jedi were behind the creation of the clone army, but the Jedi hoped this would happen, informing the people that this was a part of his plan. And then for Mace Windu, it clicked. He realized everything all at once and he whispered to Yoda before articulating it out. He told them all that they just had Palpatine's confession. There was no way for anyone to know about the creation of the clone army unless they were there. Sifo Dyas and someone named Tyrannus were behind the creation of the clone army. Tyrannus was Dooku, and Dooku was Palpatine's ally. Ergo, Palpatine and Dooku forced Master Sifo Dyas to create a clone army, killed him before he could inform anyone on Coruscant of its creation, and then Dooku used his status as Master to delete Kamino from the Jedi archives before likely murdering Master Yaddle and then setting the stage for their own galactic war to give Palpatine power. The Senate was silent for a moment. It seemed too simple to be true, but there almost wasn't a doubt in anyone's mind that it could actually be true. If Palpatine started the war, then why not arrest him until the Senate put forward a committee to investigate? They could strip the Jedi and Chancellor of their power and work as a unified body to find out the truth. The clones in the Jedi pod acted immediately, and the Jedi didn't react, agreeing to allow it to happen to prove their innocence. Palpatine, on the other hand, wasn't going to do the same thing. As clone pods approached him, he started reaching for the controls. Mace looked to Fox and apologized to him, before ripping his hands out of the cuffs before they could lock, as he used the Force to crush Palpatine's control panel, stopping him from communicating whatever it was he was going to do. This also ripped the support for the platform out, but Mace stopped it, grabbing Palpatine's pod to stop it from slamming into the ground. He looked over with a scowl as the clones approached him. Palpatine used the Force to slam their pods together, as Yoda leapt up and held the clones in the air and kept them from falling, using the Force to guide them into Senate pods before Palpatine launched electricity at the Jedi Council pod. Shakti, Anakin, and Ahsoka moved up to defend Mace, who released his grip on Palpatine's pod, allowing it to drop, as Yoda leapt forward, igniting his lightsaber and launched towards the Sith Lord. It was clear, now they knew who Palpatine really was. The senators all moved back and watched the lightning pour out of Palpatine's fingers as he slowly dropped. It was like slow motion. The Jedi sprung into action like heroes, and their evil Chancellor plummeted to the ground. Due to Yoda's quick thinking, he was able to slice Palpatine across the chest before he connected with the ground. Yoda badly injured himself upon his landing, but he was able to use the Force to cushion most of his fall. He looked up and saw the Jedi moving to rescue him, as clones supported it. One of the senators, Bail Organa, moved his pod forward and identified that it was clear that this war was a motion from the corrupt powers of the galaxy to maintain executive control over the Republic. The Jedi were not their enemies, and it was clear the Separatists were not either. He proposed an immediate call for a peace treaty with the CIS, so that they could root out Count Dooku and General Grievous. Ironically, the only individuals to disagree with this motion were representatives of corporations. While the Jedi had their own issues with everything, the Republic would call for a ceasefire, one that the Separatists would respect. The new evidence provided didn't make the CIS feel any different about the Republic, but it did give them a common enemy. It was clear that Palpatine and Dooku were the same. Both helped create a system of government that dabbled in corruption. This was the best time to wipe out both from existence. The full truth would eventually be revealed through the investigation, but the CIS and Republic agreed on the notion of a ceasefire. It would work, but it did not mean unity was a destiny for them. Mace, Anakin, and Obi-Wan were the ones to hunt down and defeat Dooku and Grievous on Sereno. When the opposition leaders were removed, the Republic attempted to bring the CIS back into the Republic, but without Dooku or corporate influence, they believed they would run a more structurally sound system than the Republic. This led to more competition between the rivaling governments, but the actual competition itself was more beneficial for the people of the galaxy. It wasn't an arms race, it was a race to show the people of each side of the galaxy who was better. So the CIS and Republic put all their effort into re-establishing bonds with their people and their systems. It was a complete 180, because at this point, the larger system of galactic government meant more leverage in the galactic political battleground. This didn't mean that there weren't tensions between either form of government, but there was no desire to reignite the flames of the Clone Wars. The irony is, the CIS saw the Outer Rim as free territory, so with millions of battle droids they waged war, while the clone troopers were left to run mercy missions with Republic territory. While all this was happening, Master Skywalker would have some twins, but he wouldn't abandon the Jedi Order. Ahsoka would also train Katuni in the meantime, finding her passion for being a Jedi once more. Anakin would maintain a position as a master for a couple of years, before eventually gaining his seat on the High Council. The Jedi during this governmental race for power maintained a space of neutrality. They mainly supported the Republic, but they were allowed to intermingle with CIS and Republic relief efforts. The CIS government wasn't trusting of the Jedi due to the war, but they were far more forgiving people than the Republic was, which is probably why they were regarded in a better light than the Republic. At the end of this government race for control, the CIS had the most influence on the galaxy. Didn't really change much. The dynamic was still peaceful, but it meant that slowly, over the centuries, the CIS would become the ruling government in the galaxy. For the rest of Anakin's life, it would be a gradual decrease of influence from the Republic, especially as the Outer Rim joined the CIS without the crime lords. By the end of Grogu's life, the Republic was simply the local governments of Coruscant, Chandrilia, and Alderaan. But it wasn't much of a republic. The Confederacy never recognized its cynical founder because he didn't represent their ideals. Instead, heroes like Mina Bontiri were remembered for trying to bring their era of war to an end. Grandmaster Grogu would see rises of darkness over his time, but as the CIS took over, it wouldn't be bound for the galaxy. Instead, he would never face the challenges that beset Yoda at the end of his life, the challenges that came at the beginning of the fall of the Republic. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to all of our patrons: Benjamin Wells, Alexandria Reese, The Beginning and End, M, Django Fett Clone, Nick 5098, INTJ Recluse, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pure Mark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tibbs, CC2024, Galvin Gaming, Tristan Mandalore, Sir Realm 1767, Darth Revan, Granddaddy Ban, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewu 670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Knox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Johnny Naguin, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Callie, Galaxy 66, Man Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Fortis Legacy Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, The Man with the First Names, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. For supporting the channel, smash that like button, swim one of the ways, check out the Patreon, cool things on there like early access to videos that are finished early. Otherwise, let's talk about this story. So I wanted to focus on the relationship between Fox and Ahsoka. I think it's a dynamic that could have actually greatly changed the outcome of the Clone Wars. If Ahsoka was present or still a Jedi at the time of Fives' trial, she could have stopped Fox from killing Fives, for example, or any number of things, and so I wanted that kind of be the base of it. But I thought it was interesting to take the idea of Ahsoka and Fox and turning it into a galaxy-defining little bond. The main thing with the Jedi Senate trial, too, is that they're kind of just going with suspicion. They're just hoping that because they weren't involved, they can prove that Palpatine has been involved. At this point, they're not really that trusting of him as it is, so it's kind of a Hail Mary, and it worked out in the end for them, but not the Republic. So, anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.